My sister-in-law and I have an agreement. She watches my kids 3 days a week, and I watch hers 3 days a week. This agreement has stood since March 2020 without issues. Any changes have been discussed weeks in advance. A couple weeks ago, we had an argument. The next day, I brought my kids to her house, dropped them off, and left. I didn't speak to my sister-in-law, because when one of us is in a rush, like I was, it's standard for us to just let the kids out, stay in the car, and drive off when you see the door open. I drove to work, about 40 minutes away. When I got there, I had about 20 missed calls, and even more texts, all from my sister-in-law, all saying she didn't want to watch the kids given our argument. Her first text arrived a little before I got to her place, but I didn't see it until I got to work because my phone is always on silent when I drive. I rang her, said I'll arrange to work from home, then come get the kids. She said I have 45 minutes to get back to her place or she would call the police. I told my supervisor the situation, and she said I could leave after I did a few things. This delayed me 20 minutes. When I got back to my sister-in-law's, just over an hour later, she said she'd already called the police when the 45 minutes ran out. I then had to stick around long enough to tell the officer that I didn't abandon my children, there was just a communication issue. Sister-in-law and I had another shouting match later over this. I arranged other childcare for my kids and I've been mostly ignoring her since. However, she reached out and apologized, and has asked if I'd be willing to go back to the old childcare arrangement. I work with kids. If I got child abandonment on my record, I would never work in my field again, which she knew. And her calling the police was a massive overreaction, so if she needs a babysitter she can go whistle for all I care. She said that if I checked my phone, talked to her that morning, or came back when I was supposed to, she would not have needed to call the police, and I did this to myself. As she gave me a warning with that first text and I could have checked my phone or spoken to her directly when I got to her place. All of which she says she would have done if she were in my position, given that we'd argued the night before. I've told her that if she thinks I'm babysitting for her, she's delusional, and she's on her own. Because of my refusal, it's looking like she may have to quit her job because my brother and her would pay more for a babysitter than they would earn from her working. My mother and brother have both called me an arsehole because there were no consequences to her calling the police, and that while she overreacted, she's apologized, so if I really forgive her, I'll let us move on. This income loss would also mean that she, my brother, and my niece and nephew might need to move somewhere cheaper. That my brother might have to take on extra hours at work. And in an extreme scenario they may even be completely unable to live independently, meaning they'd have to move in with her parents, who live several hours away. It all began after the first month we started dating, and I don't know why I didn't end things right then and there. While I was taming a shower, he looked through all of the photos on my laptop and yelled at me cause I still had photos of me and my ex. I didn't even remember, cause I don't look at those photos and I guess I was too lazy to delete them. Also, I don't use that laptop so often since it's slow.
So, yeah.
I wasn't being sentimental. I've always been a nosy person and I admit I stalked his wall, his exes, even his parents, but it was all public info. I've been alone with his laptop / phone etc, but I've never ever even thought about reading his private conversations. I wouldn't do that to anyone. He doesn't care, though. He memorized my iPad password and he read everything, including some really private posts on Reddit. He yelled at me and broke up with me. He occasionally lurks in my Facebook account, because I'm dumb and I'm always like, no, he wouldn't do that again, but he always does. Today I was logged on our shared laptop and I saw in my FB app that there was some activity going on 40 minutes ago, while I was taking a shower. I looked the Chrome history, but he had deleted everything. I lost it and I started crying, and he had the audacity to blame me for his trust issues and said that there is something I'm hiding, since I'm reacting this way. I tried to explain I have nothing to hide, but it's just horrible to feel uncomfortable at home. I can't even sleep properly anymore because I'm nervous if he'll decide to randomly read my messages. He scrolled maybe months of my FB searches, which is really embarrassing, and yelled at me again. He said I must be hiding something since I'm so upset. I don't hide anything, and I never gave him a reason not to trust me. Once he dumped me and I grabbed a beer with an old friend and he found out. Blamed me for cheating on him and even complained to my mother. I go to therapy every week, not only because of him, I have other issues. There was this group session and I met a boy who has similar problems to mine and I felt that finally I'd have someone outside therapy to talk to. He's not my type and I didn't like him in a romantic way. I just felt we could be friends, but my boyfriend found out we've talked once, because he was snooping again OFC. And again yelled at me. He said I was a cheater and that's why he had trust issues. I've always been faithful and I didn't deserve this. I changed all my passwords but I'm tired of feeling uncomfortable in my own home. He went out and told me I deserve this and he's right to invade my privacy and I have no right to be mad. I don't know what to do anymore. I finally picked up some courage and ended this pathetic excuse of a relationship. 2 days ago he came with his mother, OMG, to collect his stuff and also took the laptop he gave me as present. Which was pathetic. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount and I didn't want to be braggy about it. Especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place. And in the process of having to submit our pay stubs it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister. But it was for non-profit work making $22K / year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity / equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday. My fiancé, James, and I have been together for 3 years, planning a wedding for October 2016. A few months before we met, James bought a brand new home in a newer subdivision. We recently refinanced it and added my name. Before me, James dated a woman, Britt, for about 7 months. She's never been to this current house. From what he's told me, they broke up when he decided they weren't as compatible. The breakup was rough, to the point where he and neighbors called the police when she wouldn't leave his front yard and was screaming at 10 p.m. at night. This is all from what he and his sister have told me. I don't have a reason to not believe them. I've only had a few run-ins with Britt. These have been at restaurants or just coincidences out in public. We never spoke up until now. The problem, Britt has bought a house in the same subdivision that we live in. We even share a cul-de-sac. The only reason we found out about this is from a flyer we got welcoming her to the neighborhood. Our subdivision is very community-oriented. James insists he's never told her where he lives and hasn't spoken to her since the night he called the police. We both brushed it off as a coincidence, but lately it's becoming very weird. Here's why. I work for a company that allows me to work from home 3 out of the 5 days. Our home is a ranch and my office window faces the street. I'm not sure what Britt does for a living, but she does not work during the day. From about noon until 3, she spends her time walking up and down our street. When she passes our house, she doesn't take her eyes off of it. It's almost like she can see me in the office. She'll even stop in front of our house and stretch there for about 5 minutes. Every day anyone is at home. It makes me uncomfortable to the point where I have all of our blinds closed during the day. I understand the need for exercise, but she walks for 3 hours just going up and down our street. Another issue is when either James or I are outside with the dog, she'll let her dog outside and it will come sprinting to our yard. This causes her to come and get her dog. Every time she says, "I'm sorry, we're still working on training." James and I are always polite. Normally, I would be okay with this, but James has pointed out that any other time she lets her dog out and we're not outside, she'll immediately correct him before he runs off. She never corrects him when we're outside. We've been getting ding-dong ditched a lot since she's moved in. Something that's never happened in the 4 years that James owned the house. The doorbell will ring around dinner time, between 6 and 8, and by the time anyone gets to the door, no one will be there. It's gotten to the point where our Doberman has picked up the routine and waits by the front door, pacing. The last issue, which I believe might be illegal, is that our mail seems to go missing for a while and then pop back up. What I mean is, Britt will knock on our door and say that she received our mail and is just returning it. This has never happened with the previous owners in her house. We don't have a new mail carrier either. It seems to happen once a week and she'll always bring it on a Friday night. Based on the date on the envelopes, we can tell she's been holding it all week. This has pushed James over the edge because she had our water bill, which resulted in us being 2 days late on the payment. James is neurotic when it comes to paying bills. Every time I have to convince him not to go over and yell at her because we haven't actually caught her taking it out of our mailbox as much as I try to monitor it. She usually gets 2 days worth of mail because those are the days I'm not working from home. The other days I get it right away. I'm not sure what to do at this point. I don't want to piss her off by confronting her, but how can I get her to stop? She's making us nervous and I feel uncomfortable in my own yard most of the time because I know she is watching. I know this sounds strange, but I'm not sure if I can legally do anything about it. I don't have anything against her, it's just becoming an annoyance.